Late last week, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton filed a lawsuit against Dr. Margaret Daly Carpenter. Now, Carpenter is a New York-based doctor. So why in the world would the state of Texas be suing an out-of-state doctor? Well, it just so happens that Dr. Carpenter is the founder of the Abortion Coalition for Telemedicine, and that group prescribed abortion drugs to a pregnant Texas woman who later suffered serious complications. So here now to break down the legalese of all of this is Dr. Chris Gacek. Chris is FRC's Senior Fellow for Regulatory Studies and is also an attorney himself. Chris, welcome back to Washington Watch. Good to have you.
Good to see you, Jody.
Okay. So let's. This is pretty big news. Let's just start the legal grounds for Attorney General Paxton from Texas suing.
Well, the basis is just keep in mind that this is a civil action. It's not a criminal action, right? So he's in court suing this doctor from New York, and there are two basic reasons for this. On a very basic level, she's just practicing medicine in the state of Texas without being licensed in the state of Texas. So that's she has no license there and she has no telemedicine license. The second part of this, and the more, probably the more impactful, is that Texas has laws against physicians providing abortifacients to women in the state. So she's violating both of these provisions, and both of the provisions allowed for civil penalties. So the state is going after her to get an injunction to prevent her from doing more of this, but also there's a $100,000 per event fine that's possible. They're asking for that, and then they're also asking for attorney's fees and different fees related to the litigation.
Wow, $100,000 per incident. That could add up pretty quickly.
Sure.
All right, so how in the world was Dr. Carpenter caught in this? It was really just interstate abortion pill scheme. How did she get caught?
Well, it's really interesting. So there's a 20-year-old woman in Collier County. I think it's Collier County, Texas, and she got the pills from the doctor and had an abortion. The abortion didn't, it went awry. And remember that 1 in 25 of these chemical abortions will send a woman or the patient to the emergency room. So that's what happened to her. And she ended up needing to go, she's having a severe reaction, excessive bleeding. She had to go to an emergency room. She told her boyfriend, she was not married, to take her there. And the boyfriend didn't know anything about the pregnancy and was suspicious of all this. He went back and found the drugs, the abortion drugs, and then he started the process of, reported it to the police. So I'm not sure what all was going there. But the important thing to remember here is, aside from the dynamics of the couple, she was an extremist, right? She was a case where the abortion went awry and was one of these, 1 in 25 women who needed emergency care. So the doctor in New York prescribed pills that sent somebody to an emergency room in Texas.
Wow. Amazing. All right, so 1 in 25, that sounds like a pretty high risk medication. So while you're on that, just take a moment to remind our audience of some of the dangers that mifepristone poses to people.
Well, mifepristone, the regimen, there are two drugs. It essentially is inducing a miscarriage, right? So the FDA has noted, 1 in 25 women have sufficient complications that they have to go and have some sort of, after taking the pills, you have to go and seek emergency care, right? And that's usually has to do with, it can be things like incomplete abortion, excessive bleeding, really excessive, horrible bleeding, and then, fever, these kinds of things. So imagine all of the issues related to having a miscarriage, except that they've been, created in this artificial environment And most of the times, for example, here's another thing that the pro-life doctors have always complained about, and from the FDA process from the very beginning, the APLOG doctors and all these folks have always wanted the abortionist to have medical, admitting privileges at a hospital for their patient so that they could take them in and admit them, right? Well, this woman's in New York, this doctor. The patient's in Texas. And this is a classic example of this woman basically had no care. She's relying on her boyfriend to take her over. He doesn't know anything about the case. I mean, she could have been really, really sick, right? So this is, just in every conceivable way, suboptimal, very poor medical treatment. Let's put it that way.
So the part, at least, of the press release that came out of the office of Attorney General Paxton seemed to indicate to me that they are serious about this $100,000 penalty for each violation. Do you think that they really are serious about this? Are they going to try to make an example, if you will, out of Dr. Carpenter?
Well, I don't think it's yes, I think they're very serious. I wouldn't put it as in terms of making an example of her. She committed a crime in the state of Texas, so they're enforcing the law of Texas, right?
Good point. Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's more than that. This doctor did something serious, seriously wrong, and it affected a person in their state. It could have ended up very badly, and they have to protect the health and well-being of the state of Texas. That's why you have state, medical licensure laws, right? So these people are just kind of blowing past these pro-abortion doctors. Go ahead.
So I guess part of if we're going to use, and it's probably a bad choice of words, so making an example.
Yeah, I understand.
Part of the example of this would be to, number one, communicate to other potential doctors doing the same thing, that Texas is going to enforce their law. But secondly, if you as a doctor out of state are not familiar with the law of Texas, you certainly are now.
Well, you're going to find out more about it, especially if you're a doctor, one of the things that I'm pretty sure you're pretty certain about, if you're conscientious, is where am I licensed to practice? What are the boundaries of that? What can I do in telemedicine? So, this is part of the occupational requirements of doing your job. You really need to know what you're all about, and this woman knows what she's all about. This doctor in New York. I mean, she is part of an organization that is, focused on, getting abortions into the medical and chemical abortions through the mail into these states that have laws that are restrictive. So this is not something that she completely was aware of what she was doing.
Well, and not only Texas, but as you just said,
there
there's
are
other states too. So she may be in hot water
right.
all across the country.
She could be.
So, yeah, she could be. And very likely, you would think that they sent these drugs not only to individuals in Texas, but all over the country. So maybe this is going to spur other AGs to do something similar.
Well, remember one thing, real quickly, the Comstock Act, the federal act, right, is in place here about mailing abortifacients across state lines. Now, the Biden Justice Department, the Office of Legal Counsel, wrote an opinion that a lot of people think was very poorly done, saying that the Comstock Act doesn't apply to these, medical abortion pills and everything like that. I think one of the things that's going to be important in the considering, Pam Bondi and the Justice Department team that Trump puts up is how are they going to analyze this? Because it's not just pro-lifers who realize that this was a poor analysis of the Comstock Act. So anyway, go back to you. There's also another vehicle by which this kind of thing could be addressed, but this at the federal government, right?
Okay. Less than a minute left, Chris. Do you anticipate more doctors could be sued by Paxton or other pro-life state attorney generals?
Absolutely.
So this is coming.
Yes.
Wow. Well, listen, I can't thank you enough. Chris Gacek, it is always an honor to have you on Washington Watch. It's always great to run into you in the halls of FRC.
I always enjoy
you are one of
seeing
those
you too.
guys who seems to know so much about so many different issues taking place, and it's always an honor. Thanks again for coming on.
It's always good to see you.
FRC's Senior Fellow for Regulatory Affairs, Chris Gacek. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.